It is the agenda for the 21st century you're living in today. For a brave new world where everything that you cherished and held true will no longer exist.
On August 11th, the rain started. By the time the storm system moved out of the state, it had dumped more than 30 inches of rain in some areas.
It could be a lot worse. We didn't have the wind with all this rain. If we would have had strong wind, we'd be in a lot worse mess. But lucky it was just the rain. We got some sprouting. We had some damage. You know, whether it's 15% damage or not, something I figure somewhere in that area, I mean, we can live with that.
Red tide continues to impact our coastline. Take a look at this new map tracking the algae blooms. Red and orange shows moderate to high levels. Charlotte County is seeing the worst of it.
Take a look at this. The shores of Punta Gorda right now in some areas covered with dead fish. This is a result of red tide, which we're now seeing in Charlotte Harbor. It's not quite the mullet season that fishermen like Ryan McGee thought they would have.
One of the worst red tides I've ever seen come through the Charlotte Harbor.
This week, his fishing trips out into the harbor were more difficult than usual with all the dead fish.
Every white dot that's out there that you can see out in the water is a floating fish. It's devastating. It's all over the harbor.
More than 1 million lightning strikes have been recorded across southeast Queensland after an unusually high number of storms to start the season.
More than 1.1 million lightning strikes have been recorded by Energex since the weekend. That's 10 times more than the first week of summer last year. One of those severe cells on the weekend was captured by storm chaser Justin Noonan.
Oh, here we go.
The spectacular shots were captured on the Darling Downs. He's part of a growing group of professional storm chasers and hunts down supercells here and in the United States.
For the first time, radiation from Japan's Fukushima nuclear disaster has been found on the west coast of the U.S. It was found in water samples taken off the coast of Oregon earlier this year. Researchers say a massive amount of contaminated water was released from the Fukushima nuclear power plant following a 9.0 magnitude earthquake and tsunami in March of 2011. Radiation was released into the surrounding air and then fell into the sea. The levels of contamination off the U.S. coast are extremely low, though, and are currently deemed safe. But officials are continuing to monitor the situation, saying that the bulk of the radiation plume from the Fukushima plant has not yet made its way across the Pacific.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel sparking some controversy, suggesting Germany should ban full-face veils, often worn by Muslim women, also speaking out against Sharia law. Her comments raise questions about how other European nations handle that controversial issue.
Paris is back to banning cars to fight the city's harmful air pollution. Authorities implemented a temporary ban on cars this week. According to France 24, cars with odd-numbered license plates were not allowed on the roads on Tuesday, and those with even-numbered plates couldn't be out on Wednesday. A sharp spike in the city's pollution spurred the ban. Officials blame the spike on a combination of things, including cold weather, a lack of wind, and people burning wood for heat.
At a farm in eastern France, Stephanie Pelson surveys her chickens. Usually the birds live outside, but with a heightened threat of bird flu across the country, she's forced to keep them indoors. In France, the government is advising farmers to take extra precautions.
With a little over 40 days to go to the inauguration of Donald Trump as the next US president, preparations are already at an advanced stage. The platform where the ceremony will take place and seats for the thousands of visitors expected to attend are under construction.
On time and on budget. I'm not sure we'll do a whole lot better than that, but this is one of those projects that definitely has to be on time, and you always want to be on budget, and we are.
Officials say they're expecting about 1 million people for the inauguration and events surrounding it in Washington, D.C. That's 0.8 million less than the number who showed up to see Barack Obama sworn in for the first time. Trump is expected to move into the White House on January the 20th after he's sworn in. Several groups say they plan to hold demonstrations.
For the first time in decades, the next generation of Americans may be poorer than their parents. New research finds that younger adults' chances to earn more than their parents have plummeted in recent decades. That means a lower quality of life overall. The study is fueling concerns that the classic story of steady upward mobility is disappearing in the face of a widening wealth gap. It found that barely half of Americans born in 1980 earn more at age 30 than their parents did at the same age. For Americans born in 1940, that rate was 92% back in 1972. The researchers found two main causes of this drop in mobility. One, economic growth has slowed in recent decades. 2, income inequality is rising, meaning fewer people are benefiting from any new income being created. In order for the problem to be fixed, researchers say there needs to be more growth for all Americans and not just those at the top.
Of course, in 2016, our intelligence community determined that there was malicious cyber activity intended to interfere with our elections. In the high confidence assessment that was released this past October, the intelligence community made very clear that this was activity directed by the highest levels of the Russian government.
It's now clear that so-called fake news can have real-world consequences. This isn't about politics or partisanship. Lives are at risk. Lives of ordinary people just trying to go about their days, to do their jobs, contribute to their communities. It's a danger that must be addressed, and addressed quickly.
When a high school student starts waving a knife and threatening classmates, that's when a campus police officer took action. Some of this is certainly disturbing, but this is how it ended.
More than 1,000 protesters gathered outside the South Korean parliament to urge lawmakers to vote in favour of impeaching the president. They got their wish. They passed the impeachment bill in the growing row over an influence peddling scandal. Park Geun-hye could now become the country's first democratically elected leader to be ousted from office. Park's accused of colluding with a friend and a former aide to pressure big businesses to donate to 2 foundations set up to back her policy initiatives. She's denied any wrongdoing but has apologised for carelessness in her ties with her friend. The scandals led to mass rallies every Saturday for the past 6 weeks calling for Park to quit. Opinion polls show overwhelming public support for her impeachment. The Constitutional Court must now decide whether to uphold the motion and remove Park from office or reject it and reinstate her.
As the rebels increasingly lose their grip on Aleppo, Syrian armed forces continuing just as a man was being evacuated, claiming he was shot by rebels as he tried to flee. They shot me as I was running out, he says. They don't allow anyone to get out. They said, "Are you going to the regime areas?" The opposition strongly denies its fighters would harm civilians, but the rebels do acknowledge they won't be able to hold out in Aleppo much longer. And that realization is leading to an avalanche of people trying to flee the rebel districts. Syrian troops throwing some bread, but not nearly enough to quell the hunger of the many who've been starving for months.
The Syrian military has made major advances once again in the past 24 hours, and we can see that as the army moves forward, more and more people are coming out of those former besieged areas.
Many of those fleeing families with small children, struggling to carry the few belongings they were able to take.
help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate, only the unloved hate, the unloved and the unnatural. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite.
In a time of domestic crisis,